This week on What in the World is Going On, I'm going to be talking about Iran, the Golan Heights, and one of the greatest tank battles ever. So stay tuned, friends. On October 12th, we at the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry reported that Iran aspires to build an army on Israel's Golan Heights border. And in response to that, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett doubled down and warned Iran, saying that, quote, the Golan Heights is Israel, period. Of course, friends, that territory was within the borders of Israel, which was given to the Jewish people as an everlasting possession, as God swore it to himself in Genesis 15. And thus Israel recaptured the Golan from Syria in the Six-Day War of 1967. And in 1973, in the Yom Kippur War, Israel defended that territory in one of the greatest tank battles of all time in what has been called the Valley of Tears because of the many casualties in that war, especially within the Syrian army. And friends, this really was a David and Goliath type of battle because 1,500 Syrian tanks came up against a mere 160 Israeli tanks. Yet Israel defeated them, destroying 600 Syrian tanks with only 7 Israeli tanks remaining. Of course, Syria never knew that Israel was nearly defeated in that battle, yet they fled and retreated as God created a panic within. And as you can see in the pictures I took on top of Mount Bentel in 2019, the long valley that stretches in between it and Mount Hermon. And in the distance, friends, is Syria, with its capital, Damascus, just a mere 60 kilometers away. And today, Iran continues its efforts to establish a permanent foothold in Syria and a buildup of an army in which they plan to attack Israel one day soon. And the God of Israel laughs. Let me read to you, friends, a few verses from Ezekiel 38 and 9. This is what God says in Ezekiel 38, verse 1. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog, that's speaking of a person, of the land of Magog, that's including many of the stands, including Afghanistan, the prince of Rosh, that's speaking of Russia, Meshach and Tubal, speaking there of Turkey. How do we know that? Very simple. Go to an ancient map and look at those places that are named there, and then look at its modern-day equivalent on a map of today. There again, in verse 5, take a look. We have Persia, that's Iran, coming along with them. And Ethiopia, that's most likely Sudan, Libya. And there again, Gomar, West Turkey, and Togarmah, East Turkey. And then look at, as this coalition comes against Israel. Verse 8, it says, In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They were brought out of the nations. That's speaking of the Jewish people there. And now all of them dwell safely. You will ascend, verse 9, coming like a storm. And then it says in verse 10, it's going to be an evil plan that they've made. Verse 11, you will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take plunder, to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against a people gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. Friends, they're coming. They're coming to attack. They're coming to take the booty one day, this coalition, including Iran. And look at what happens in verse 18 of the same chapter. Judgment comes, God says, and it will come to pass at the same time when Gog comes against the land of Israel, says the Lord God, that my fury will show in my face. And then read what's coming. Not very pretty. What's coming? Take a look here. It says, verse 3, it says, Then I will knock the bow out of your left hand and cause the arrows to fall. Verse 4, You shall fall upon the mountains of Israel, you and all your troops, and the peoples who are with you. I will give you to the birds of prey of every sort and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. And why is God doing all this? Look at verse 7. So I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. I will not let them profane my holy name anymore. And then the nations shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. And for 7 years, Israel burns the weapons of war. And for 7 months, they are burying the dead. Wow. Wow. You see, friends, there's another battle coming. And it is a warning to the world who thinks that they can trample all over God's land and his people as though he doesn't exist. No, he's not going to allow that to go on forever, friends. But until that time, please remember to pray for Israel. Pray that her leaders would be wise to the schemes of her enemies. And really, friends, that the world, both Jew and Gentile, would turn to Israel's Messiah, Jesus, the only true hope for today's world. So until next time, friends, this has been What in the World is Going On with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. Have a good night, everyone.